If you agree that respect isn't something you wear on your chest, but something you carry in your actions, make sure to like and subscribe, because this story proves it in ways no one saw coming. It began in a place no one expected. The motor pool, far from the parades, far from the glory. Just concrete floors slick with oil, the smell of rust, and the hum of machines that had been written off years ago. Most walked past without looking, without caring. But for Sergeant Leah Torres, late 20s, dark hair always tied back beneath a grease-stained cap, this corner of the base was her battlefield. She wasn't on a recruitment poster. She wasn't the one giving speeches about valor. She was just the mechanic everyone underestimated, crouched beside an engine so old they'd already marked it as scrap. They called it Cerberus, a relic from another era, half cannibalized for parts and shoved against the wall like an afterthought. But Leah worked on it quietly, steadily, as if she knew something no one else did. The others didn't hide their laughter. Why bother with a corpse? One recruit sneered as he passed, his boots leaving muddy streaks across the concrete. That thing hasn't roared since before you were born. Another added, she just likes to play with dead toys, better than being in the fight, right? They thought it was harmless fun, their smirks sharp, their words echoing across the hangar. Leah didn't answer. She never did. Her hands stayed buried in the guts of the machine, fingers tracing cables and bolts with the care of someone handling a living thing. She wasn't just fixing an engine. She was memorizing it, breathing life into something forgotten. Every night after duty, when the others were in the rec hall or asleep, she'd stay behind, notebook open, diagrams sketched in neat lines, formulas crammed into margins. She tested, rewired, recalibrated. No applause, no witnesses. Just her, the hum of a desk lamp, and the steady scratching of a pencil. And still the ridicule grew. A young lieutenant, sharp haircut, sharper tongue, once stopped in front of her bay, arms folded, eyes full of arrogance. "Sergeant," he said, his voice dripping with condescension, "you realize the only thing that's going to happen if you turn that key is a cough and a fire hazard, right?" The recruits behind him chuckled, waiting for her to snap back. But Leah didn't look up. She wiped her hands with a rag, flipped another page in her notebook, and went back to work. Silence was her answer. That silence unsettled them more than anger would have. They whispered about her when she wasn't in earshot. Some said she was wasting her career, that she'd never make rank stuck in the shadows of grease and rust. Others muttered that maybe she wasn't cut out for real combat. And every time she passed, they fell quiet, not out of respect, but out of the kind of uneasy dismissal people give when they don't understand someone. What they didn't know, what no one had asked, was why she was there. Why this particular tank, this particular engine, mattered enough for her to spend months in solitude when newer machines sat gleaming just a few bays away. To them, it was junk. To her, it was memory. Buried deep inside Cerberus, beneath the layers of dust and neglect, was a history that had never been told aloud. Leah knew every bolt because she'd learned them under fire, miles from safety, where engines were the difference between survival and silence. But here, no one cared about that. Here, she was the quiet one in the corner, the grease monkey who scribbled in her notebook while others barked orders and laughed too loudly at their own jokes. She let them. She kept her head down, hands steady, patience her armor. Because she knew something the rest of them had forgotten. Machines don't betray you. They don't lie about your worth. If you care for them, they answer. And one day, when everyone else had stopped believing, Cerberus would answer her. Weeks passed, and the gap widened. The lieutenant strutted through the bays, quoting manuals he barely understood, bragging about simulations as if they were wars. The recruits parroted his swagger, confident in their polished boots and untested voices. Leah? She kept showing up early, staying late, jotting down numbers that no one asked for, testing circuits no one believed mattered. She moved like someone with a secret, calm, deliberate, unhurried. And though most dismissed her, a few began to notice. A private in supply, carrying a crate of parts, once paused to watch as she reassembled a section of the transmission blindfolded, her hands moving with practiced ease. He said nothing, but later whispered to another. She's not just tinkering. She knows things. Words spread in murmurs, half disbelief, half awe. But still, the laughter was louder. And Leah never gave them the satisfaction of a reaction. Because she remembered something else. The sound of engines failing in the middle of nowhere, the cold silence after. She remembered the weight of responsibility when no one was coming, and the only chance of getting out alive was knowing every inch of metal by heart. Cerberus wasn't junk to her. It was preparation, insurance, a reminder that sometimes the things others discard are the very things that save them when the lights go out. And though no one realized it yet, that day was coming. The day when all their shiny machines would fail, when chaos would strip away arrogance, and when the only sound that mattered was the thunder of an engine everyone else had forgotten. For now, she worked alone, wiping her hands clean, notebook tucked back into her pocket. The hangar echoed with laughter and boots marching away. Leah didn't look up. She didn't need to. She already knew. They would laugh, until they couldn't. And when that moment came, Cerberus would awaken. The morning it happened didn't look different from any other. The sky over the base was gray, the kind that seemed to flatten everything beneath it. Recruits jogged past the motor pool in formation, their chants echoing too loud for the hour. Leah Torres was already in her bay, wiping down her tools, grease streaking her coveralls in lines like battle scars. She didn't glance up when the lieutenant walked by, his usual entourage behind him, but she heard the laughter. Still babysitting that corpse, Torres? We've got real drills today. Don't strain yourself lifting wrenches while the rest of us do the hard work. They thought the day belonged to them. They thought the training exercise was just another chance to bark orders and show off. But as the sun climbed higher, the warning sirens cut through the air, sharp and jarring. This wasn't the usual call for formation. It was a readiness drill. Surprise. Full lockdown, full response. Every unit scrambled. The recruits who had been laughing minutes earlier were now sprinting, helmets half-buckled, rifles rattling in nervous hands. The lieutenant stormed into the motor pool, barking orders. Get every vehicle online now. His voice was loud, confident, but there was an edge to it, a crack of unease. Engines roared to life in staggered bursts. For a moment, it looked like control. Then, like dominoes falling, one by one the sounds choked out. Starters failed. The electronics glitched. Whole lines of armored vehicles sputtered, coughed, and fell silent. The air filled with a panicked chorus of curses, clattering tools, frantic shouts. Leah stayed at her station, wiping her hands calmly on her rag as chaos unfolded around her. She'd warned them, in her own way. Weeks earlier, she'd filed reports about the unstable calibrations in the newer models, the overlooked wear on their circuits. No one had read them. Or maybe they had and laughed. She's just a mechanic. She worries too much. Now, the lieutenant's voice grew desperate. Get them running. Move, move, move. But the machines refused. Recruits kicked tires, slammed hoods shut, tried to force life into engines that weren't built for this. Radios crackled with command demanding answers. And for the first time, the lieutenant had none. Leah rose slowly, brushing her palms against her thighs, and walked past the frantic scramble. Her boots echoed against the concrete, steady, unhurried. She moved toward the corner bay where Cerberus waited, its armor dull with age, its silhouette looming like a sleeping beast. The recruits barely noticed her at first. They were too busy failing. But one by one, heads turned. The grease monkey, the woman who wasted her time on a relic. She climbed up onto the side of the tank, notebook in hand, and slid into the seat as if she belonged there. The lieutenant saw her and snapped, his voice cracking. Torres, get off that thing. It's not operational. That's an order. She didn't look at him. She placed her hand on the ignition, her fingers brushing the key she'd hidden there for weeks. She had checked, double-checked, rebuilt, and rewired until she trusted it more than she trusted the men shouting around her. She whispered softly, maybe to herself, maybe to the machine. Time to wake up. The moment stretched, every eye in the bay pulling toward her. She turned the key. The engine coughed once, twice, and then it roared. Not the weak, sputtering cough of the others, but a guttural thunder that shook the walls. Dust rattled from the rafters. The ground vibrated. Cerberus wasn't dead. It was alive, and it was answering her. The recruits froze, their panic silenced by awe. The lieutenant's jaw went slack, words caught in his throat. And that's when the Marine captain stepped into the motor pool, boots striking hard against the floor. His gaze swept the chaos, the silent vehicles, the one beast alive in the corner. He pointed at Leah, his voice sharp, Commanding, final. Cerberus Awakens. Sergeant Torres, lead the formation. The room went still. Every head snapped toward her. For months she had been invisible, a shadow bent over grease and bolts. Now she was the only one standing tall, framed by the machine they had mocked. Her hands tightened on the controls, her posture calm, steady. Outside, the sirens still blared. Inside, every excuse, every laugh, every dismissal hung heavy in the air. The lieutenant finally found his voice, but it trembled. She can't. The captain didn't look at him. She already has. And with that, the order was sealed. The relic was no longer junk. The mechanic was no longer invisible. The drill was no longer theirs. It belonged to her. To the woman who had believed in what everyone else threw away. The recruits stared, silent now, their laughter replaced by something new, respect, or maybe fear. Leah didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply shifted the gears, the tank rumbling forward, steel grinding against concrete, alive under her command. For the first time, they saw her not as the grease monkey, not as the girl with oil-stained hands, but as the one person who had been ready all along. Cerberus had awakened, and so had Leah Torres. The roar of Cerberus filled the motor pool like a storm breaking open. Dust shook loose from the rafters, tools rattled across benches, recruits stumbled back with wide eyes. It wasn't supposed to be possible. To them, Cerberus was dead weight, a relic too stubborn to scrap, too broken to save. Yet here it was, alive, moving, and answering to Sergeant Leah Torres. She sat tall in the driver's seat, her hands steady on the controls, her dark eyes calm, unshaken. The Marine captain's words still echoed, sharp and decisive. Cerberus Awakens. Sergeant Torres, lead the formation. No one dared argue. Not the recruits, not the sergeants, not even the lieutenant whose arrogance had cracked the loudest. His face was pale now, his mouth working soundlessly like he was trying to speak, but no sound would come. For months, he had mocked her, laughed at her grease-stained coveralls and notebooks, confident in his own shallow authority. But the moment the captain gave that order, the air shifted. Authority had moved. Respect had shifted. And for the first time, the lieutenant was silent. Outside, the base was chaos. The readiness drill had escalated into a full-scale simulation of breach and lockdown. Sirens wailed, smoke grenades popped in the fields, squads scrambled to hold their sectors. But without vehicles, the perimeter was collapsing. And then the thunder came. Cerberus rolled out of the motor pool, its treads grinding across the gravel, its engine bellowing with life. Soldiers turned at the sound, their eyes widening at the sight of the beast reborn. "Torres, take point," the captain barked, his voice cutting clean through the sirens. Leah didn't hesitate. She pushed Cerberus forward, the tank surging ahead with surprising speed, its systems synced under her touch. Weeks of silent work, months of patient rewiring, every bolt and cable she had memorized, all of it sang back to her now in perfect unison. She steered toward the breach point, where smoke and shouting blurred together. The recruits who had mocked her earlier now scrambled to follow, forming up behind the one engine that still answered. The simulation turned real for them. Targets popped in the tree line. Cerberus systems, once dismissed as obsolete, locked on with precision. Leah's voice rang steady through the comms. Target acquired. Advancing. The recruits' voices shook in reply, but they obeyed. The unit moved as one, anchored not by their lieutenant's empty shouts, but by the rumble of the machine their sergeant commanded. Minutes felt like hours. The drill pushed them to the breaking point. Smoke blinded them. Comms crackled with static. Simulated fire burst too close. Yet Cerberus never faltered. Leah maneuvered the tank through obstacles the newer models would have stalled on, anticipating glitches before they happened, guiding the squad through chaos with the quiet confidence of someone who had lived this before, not in simulations, but in the field. And when the last target went down, when the sirens finally fell silent, the base held its breath. The captain raised a hand. "An exercise." The words cut through the air, final, commanding. Slowly, the smoke thinned. Recruits lowered their rifles, their eyes darting toward the tank that still growled quietly, alive under Leah's hands. Silence followed. Heavy-weighted. The kind of silence that shifts everything. The captain stepped forward, his boots crunching against gravel, his eyes fixed on Leah as she climbed down from the tank. She wiped her hands on her rack, the same way she always did, unbothered by the grease that stained her fingers. Around her, the recruits stood straighter, their laughter gone, replaced by a respect they didn't yet know how to voice. "Sergeant Torres," the captain said, his tone firm but carrying something else beneath it, acknowledgement. "That wasn't luck. That was preparation. Tell them why you knew this beast would answer you." Leah's gaze swept across the recruits, pausing briefly on the lieutenant, whose face was still pale with shame. Her voice was calm, even, "Because I've done it before. Not here. Not in drills. Out there." She nodded toward the horizon, where the sky seemed to stretch forever. When engines failed in the middle of nowhere, when everything depended on one spark, one cable, one steady hand, that's when I learned. You don't wait for someone else to fix it. You fix it yourself. You prepare before anyone else believes it matters. The recruits shifted uncomfortably, the weight of her words pressing heavier than any reprimand. The captain gave a single nod. "And that's why when everyone else failed, only you were ready." He turned his head just slightly, his voice sharpening. "Lieutenant." The lieutenant snapped to attention, but his voice cracked. "Sir, you dismissed her warnings. You mocked her work. You failed your command today." The captain's tone was ice. "Effective immediately, you're relieved of motorpool oversight." Gasps rippled through the ranks, but no one dared speak. The captain's gaze returned to Leah. "Sergeant Torres, it's yours." Leah didn't gloat. She didn't smile. She simply nodded once, quiet as always. The silence carried more weight than celebration ever could. Around her, the recruits finally began to understand. Respect isn't barked into existence. It's earned, piece by piece, in the dark, in the hours no one notices. And when the moment comes, it speaks louder than rank. That night, long after the exercise ended, the motor pool was quiet again. The recruits had gone. The lieutenant's nameplate had already been removed from his office door. Leah sat on the treads of Cerberus, her notebook open across her lap. She flipped to the last page she had filled during the drill. Her handwriting was neat, steady. At the top of the page, she had written 6 words. "They laugh until they need you." And outside, beyond the motor pool, whispers had already started. Whispers that carried faster than orders, faster than drills. About the young mechanic who woke the dead engine. About the captain who called it Cerberus Awakens. About the sergeant no one respected, until she became the only one they could. The next morning, when Leah walked into the bay, the laughter was gone. In its place, the recruits stood straighter, their voices quieter. One by one, as she passed, they nodded. Not forced, not mocking, real. And when she climbed back into Cerberus, they watched with the silence of men and women who finally understood that true leadership doesn't arrive with trumpets. It arrives with patience, with preparation, with the sound of an engine everyone else gave up on. Cerberus had awakened, and with it, so had respect.